Hey gang, it's the Christmas season, so, suicide rates are rising, homeless dudes are chugging bottles of mouthwash, and we're killing billionaires now. Yeah, a bit of a shocking start to the season, but hey, I suppose it's, God's will, right? Anyway, to celebrate the wonderful time that is Christmas time, let's talk about some depressing music, shall we? Take this out of the way. I don't want that there anymore. I fucking hate Christmas. Hi, I'm Ghost. I'm your host. That guy's my editor. He's making a little bit of noise like a little bitch. Ruining my intro and all that, so I gotta, oh, he's there. Hi, I'm Ghost. I'm your host. Today let's talk about some of the most depressing albums I've listened to in my life. I've listened to a lot of music. Music is a large portion of my personality, even though most of my channel revolves around horror. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Music is ultimately, like, my biggest interest. I'm a musician myself, and I love listening to music. I've listened to probably close to 500 albums this year, which is pretty good. So yeah, I've listened to a lot of music in my life. I recently hit my 1,000th rating on Rate Your Music, so I thought that it would be fun just to talk about some of the more, sad albums that I've listened to, and I'll start off with Coil was a, post-industrial project consisting of John Balance and Peter Christopherson. So this album is, lyrically speaking, relatively similar to a lot of their releases, in terms of how much it'll dampen your mood, but a little bit of background information will make you realize just how sad this album really is. So around this time, John Balance was not treating substances very well, particularly alcohol. He was in a very self-destructive time. He even needed help standing up during some of the performance. He was not well at the time, but regardless, his musicianship, especially paired with Christopherson, was still on another level. This performance and this recording is an extremely powerful and moving piece that really kind of worms its way into your head and refuses to leave. The day I listened to it, there wasn't much else on my mind besides the music present on the album. Lyrically speaking, it's a little hard to dissect, but I'll read some of the lyrics right now real quick. The dreamer is still asleep. May the goddess keep us from single vision and Newton's sleep. The dreamer is still asleep. The dreamer is still asleep. He's inventing landscapes in their magnetic field, working out a means of escape. We'll cut across the crop circles. The seer says no. Not much time left for these escape attempts. Look at it this way. In 10 years' time, who'll care? Who'll even remember? One dies like that, deep within it, almost inside it. It's there for a reason. Coil is a very profound and intriguing project to me, and I think that, if you aren't familiar with Coil, you might be familiar with Throbbing Gristle, which is a very, very well-known pioneer of industrial music, and that had Peter Christopherson in it. So this was a later project in their career. And John Balance and Peter Christopherson, they were lovers, and there's just such an interesting feeling knowing that the two of them were performing this, despite the fact that Peter was essentially watching John rapidly spiral into what would later lead to his death, drunkenly falling off of a balcony. And the ambulance died in his arms is a very, very sad, powerful, and intriguing piece of music that's certain to leave a bit of an impact on you, and I do highly recommend it. And as for my favorite song, it's probably Triple Suns and The One You Bury.
When I take out the garbage at night, I'm not with you then.
A Crow Looked at Me by Mount Eerie, a side project of The Microphones. Yes, the project is called, the band is called Mount Eerie. There is an album by Microphones, different thing, side project. The album was made in direct response to Phil Elverum, sorry if I mispronounced that, his wife's death, leaving him taking care of their child alone. And, well, it's a very emotionally powerful album. It's very blunt and in your face. It's not very, like, poetic and indirect. It very directly is like, you were here, now you're not. I can't help but think about you when I, like, look at my daughter and when I look around the house that we lived in together, and it's very, very interesting and powerful and acclaimed. Personally, while this album is definitely a powerful release, I've never been a big fan of Elvirum's work. I think the microphones are fine. And this album I felt relatively mixed on. I didn't dislike the album. I understood that it was very personal to him, and I haven't been through what he's been through, so obviously there's a little bit of a disconnect in that regard. But in my head, just with how blunt everything was, I thought that the album was just too much of the same thing. I think that, quite plainly, every song kind of had the same general idea to it. And while I'm very sorry for his loss, I think that he's tackled tough subjects in a better manner on other releases. So while A Crow Looked at Me is undoubtedly a memorable release and far from a bad one, personally I thought it was not for me. I'll now briefly hand it over to my editor, because he definitely feels a little bit strongly about this release.
Hey ya boys, it's me, the TDG to the double G. Yeah. Anyway, and I'm here to quickly talk about my opinions on A Crow Looked on Me by Mount Eerie. This album is kind of exploitative. Look, you can say whatever you want about, like, singer-songwriter stuff and basically, like, trauma dumping for most of it. I mean, that's just kind of part of the genre. But, like, there was no, like, focus here on, like, different subjects. This is entirely an album about his wife's death. And it's basically an entire album profiting off of his wife's death. Not only is this one of the most acclaimed albums of all time, but he has for sure made money off of this, which makes me question, you know, is this ethical? I mean, it's something, well, it's not like something of just like you're showing your journey. You're just showing the fact that your wife is dead. That's all this is. I do want to quickly bring up that about a Play-Doh cooked in tea. If you guys don't know what this, it's not even an album. It's 7 songs, each like 1 minute long, and it's completely making fun of this album. It's entirely extremely disrespectful, but also it makes a good point at the end.
I'm so glad my wife died, so I have album of the year.
You have made success from your wife's death. Like, that's all this is, and it really does make me question, as a person who truly does love the singer-songwriter genre, if this is entirely good to do.
Alright, you're out of time. Get back to the cell. Yeah, I'm definitely in a bit of a different boat than my editor, but I do totally see where he's coming from. I feel like, while definitely personal and earnest and a little harrowing, I think that it could have benefited from having been more varied and a little less consistently direct. But regardless, it's his project, and I'm definitely in the minority in saying that, so I thought that it was worth bringing up as an interesting piece of music. Alright, I know I just kicked off my editor, but he's gonna be back for like 2 minutes, so, yeah! I'm free! I'm free! I'm free!
Hey guys, it's TDG to the double G again, and I'm going to be talking about Unhappy Refrain by Wowaka. Now, if you don't know what this album is, you probably know who Hatsune Miku is. If you don't know what Hatsune Miku is, you don't have a life. Hatsune Miku is a Vocaloid software that basically, you type stuff into it and it will sing for you. That's all it is. and, people make music and albums out of it. And Wowaka, who is a pretty famous Vocaloid producer, made Unhappy Refrain. Now, if you look at this album completely just by, the sound and, it's pretty groovy. I'm just gonna say, it's pretty groovy. But, of course, the lyrics are in Japanese, so you have no idea what they're exactly talking about. Until you look at the translation. This is an album about suicide. So, all that time that you spent, you're yeah, this is great. The entire time, they were talking about, if you're listening to In the Gray Zone, which is a song I really love, it's just I'm gonna hang myself, and it's ooh, that's... I was dancing to that. Ooh. Just as an example, the album starts off with this awesome beat, with this awesome instrumental and beat, and then when it gets into the lyrics, it's also groovy. And then you look at the lyrics, and the first lines of the album are a shotgun and a Telecaster. Do you hate the sounds of gunshots in the streets? What? And the entire album is about loneliness and not caring for yourself and suicide. And it's entirely... I think it's really awesome in that regard, because you would never get that on a first listen if, obviously you would if you understood Japanese. But if you were just, like me, I went into this album knowing that it was a bit depressing, but, I did not realize the full scope of it until afterward. This was actually an album I listened to on my birthday. It will always be kind of special to me because of that.
Bitches, I'm back, and I'm here to talk about one more album for y'all. Oh, he forgot about something. What did he forget about?
You forgot to say what your favorite on Coil Looked At Me was.
Oh, yeah. My favorite song on the album was either Real Death or Sorry Moria. Real Death because I think it's the most memorable, Sorry Moria because it's just one of the generally better songs. You didn't say your favorite song on. He's coming back real quick.
In the Gray Zone.
That was his favorite song on the last album.
On the ground, but not for long.
This album is a very, very special album to me. I think that it's easily one of my favorite contemporary folk releases ever. It's just an incredibly powerful and intriguing album, and it tells a lot of interesting stories, and I think that it's really, really intriguing. This album was released in 1984 by this duo, and it's as I said, a contemporary folk and a singer-songwriter album that is, well, if you couldn't tell by the title, a bit of a bummer. I feel like the track that most clearly is an example of how much of a bummer this album can be is Life Without Love, which is a song where you might not realize it at first, but it becomes quite apparent that this man is, actively dying because he's trying to commit suicide. So, he's bleeding everywhere, and he's talking about how he has no love in his life, and after he got dumped or whatever. And it's quite the bummer. I'll actually read a few lyrics. So it starts off with night calls, rain falls inside and outside my head. All of my life I've been told not to wish I was dead. Thunder, I wonder where this affliction will lead, now that the one who has loved me has left me to bleed. Hope dies, faith cries, when will the tears ever cease? God send your mercy, I'm longing some kind of release. Souls shake, hearts break, only the sorrow remains. Well, I'm losing ground and there's nothing to swallow but pain. And then skipping in a tiny bit more. Well, I'm heading into a slumber, there's no place on earth left to go. Now that my heartbeats are numbered, I don't know. Bit of a bummer. But regardless, very quality song. Very powerful and very, just generally speaking, well written, and that applies to the entire album. This album is remarkable, and I really think that it has a cool sound to it, mixed with very well-written lyrics. Easily my favorite track is Kiss Another Day Goodbye, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. It just is very interesting lyrically. It creates an image in your head very effectively, and I think that just generally speaking, the entire album is very good with a lot of imagery. Songs from Suicide Bridge is a great album, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, I hope you've found some interest in some of these releases. They're all interesting releases, and I think that they're all worth checking out at some point. And yeah, I hope you had a good time with this video, even if the topic was a bit of a bummer. And as much as I was mocking the season and personally don't enjoy it much, I'm wishing you all the best December and the chance that I don't see you again before the end. Thank you, and I wish you the best. Hopefully I'll see you next time.